a tragic tale for you. Oompa, loompa, jumpa dee.
I hate that song. I hate that song. It's the worst song of the entire saga of Wonka. It just creeps me out every single time. How many of you have seen the new Wonka movie? Yeah, okay, we've had a couple of you, okay, so don't fear, we're going to watch some scenes, you'll get caught up with the entire story. We're in a series we're calling At the Movies, and we really just want to take 4 movies that we see inside of our culture, inside of our world, and we want to look through the lens of how do we see Jesus. This is how I like to say it. We're looking at cultural highlights that give us spiritual insights. Do you know that movies, actually, the themes and the messages they give to something, they have messaging, they have themes, they have things that you can wrestle with. And honestly, movies sometimes are made to wrestle with the emotions and the feelings of humanity. And we're going to look at some stories that draw out God's story inside of our culture. And we do this for 3 different reasons, okay? First is, as a church, we want to look for Jesus. And we get to do that in a fun way during this series. We're going to look at some movies, and I challenge you, don't just leave it here. But as you watch movies, maybe you'll find themes and messages that point us back to Jesus in one way, shape, or form. Because at the end of the day, every single one of these weeks, we're going to find Jesus and the story of Jesus in and through it. The second reason is, as a church, we want to have fun. We like to have fun. We want to have fun. We're going to enjoy this time together. So that's why you have giant popcorn up here. That's why on the patio you have actual popcorn you can eat during the service. Yes, some of you grew up in the old school era where you couldn't have food in the auditorium. We allow food here, and you should eat it here, right? Giveaways happen. We have scenes from the movies, all sorts of stuff. We want to have fun, the movie night, and we would just invite you to have fun with this. It's meant to be laughed at. It's meant to have fun with. It's meant to enjoy the movie scenes, all of those things. Just enjoy it. The last thing is this. If you're a parent in the room, eyes up here, because here's the reality. Inside of our culture, inside of our kind of society, we have these messaging systems, right? Movies in particular, TV shows, music. And you have a chance to help walk with your kid along the journey of discipling them into God's story. And you can use things that happen inside of pop culture. And one of the ways that I'd encourage you as you leave here today and you watch the movie with your kids or you sat with them in service, there's a family conversation guide in the back that you can grab off the wall. And it's not meant to be like read through and have your kids answer the questions verbatim. It's just a kind of context for you to have conversations with your kids coming out of a Sunday like this, and maybe gives you context to watch other movies with them and be able to facilitate conversations around Jesus in light of that, okay? So that's back there for you to grab during any of the weeks that we're called Wonka. But before we get to there, we got to show you what's coming up in the weeks to come, the previews, okay? Next week, we're going to look at Inside Out. How many have seen Inside Out or Inside Out 2? Yeah, lots of you. Yes, right? It is a very popular movie this summer with Inside Out 2 coming. So we're going to look at all the feels, right? All the emotions, and what does it have to say about Jesus in the midst of it. Week 3, we're going to look at Jesus Revolution. How many have seen Jesus Revolution? Yeah, we've seen that movie, right? Talking about the moment in time where this Jesus movement took place inside of America, coming out of California in the 70s and 80s, and it follows that story. But we're going to look at the original Jesus movement and ultimately how that launches us into the church era. Then the last movie is a movie called Sound of Hope. Sound of Hope. How many of you went and saw that in the theaters by chance? Yeah. So not many of us. I saw that it was only in theaters for a short amount of time, so it doesn't shock me. But this is based off a true story. And it's fascinating because it kind of zeroes in on a church in Texas who saw the need to run into the foster care system in their city. And over the course of the movie, what you see, and this happened in real life, that 22 families from that church ended up fostering 77 kids out of the foster care system in their community, basically changing everything about the foster care crisis inside of their community. And we're going to look at that story, and maybe it tugs in that way, but ultimately we're going to look at what does it mean as a church to do hard things, and how does that ultimately culture us in following Jesus, and what it looks like to follow him into those hard things. But today, we're looking at a fun movie called Wonka. How many of you have just seen any of the Willy Wonka movies? There's 3 of them. Yeah, okay. So you kind of know it's based around chocolate, which someone asked me, are we going to have chocolate this morning? I was like, dang it, we missed. This would have been the one Sunday to just have chocolate fountains and chocolate everywhere, right? We missed it. I'm personally sorry. Next time we do a Wonka movie, we'll have chocolate, okay? In 25 years. I'm just kidding. But here's the reality. We're going to look at this fun movie about the origin story of Willy Wonka. But before we jump into it, let's take a look at the trailer, and then we'll get to the story.
I've spent the past 7 years traveling the world perfecting my craft. You see, I'm something of a magician, inventor, and chocolate maker. So quiet up and listen down. Nope, scratch that, reverse it.
Mr. Wonka, I can see you're a man of great ingenuity.
What are you doing?
I'm making chocolate, of course. How do you like it? Dark, white, nutty, absolutely insane.
Many people have come here to sell chocolate. They've all been crushed by the chocolate cartel. You can't get a shop without selling chocolate, and you can't sell chocolate without a shop.
No daydreaming.
What are we gonna do, Willy?
Huh.
Huh?
Huh.
A double huh?
Do you have a pencil and paper?
Uh-huh.
I got an idea. I know things haven't been easy for you. They're gonna get better.
You promise?
I pinky promise. That's the most solemn vow there is.
Where do we start?
A good chocolate chip is simple.
Where's this? It's just
What's happening? Oh, what's a chocolate that makes it fly?
Let's find out, shall we?
Who's for Hoverchuck? Nothing to see here. Just a small group of people defying the laws of gravity.
Ladies and gentlemen of the Gallery Gourmet, my name is Willy Wonka.
He's good. Too good.
Pretty sure I've gained about 150 pounds in the last 2 weeks.
You could change her life, Mr. Wonka. Change all their lives.
Run away!
Every good thing in this world started with a dream.
Mama.
Mark my words, this is gonna be the greatest chocolate shop the world has ever seen. So you're the funny little man who's been following me.
I will have you know that I am a perfectly respectable size for an Oompa Loompa.
An Oompa what now?
Allow me to refresh your memory.
Oh, I don't think I want to hear that.
Too late. I've started dancing now. Once we've started, we can't stop.
It is par to the course for any Willy Wonka movie. It is weird. It is nutty. It has moments where you're like, what is happening right now? And yet there's a story that plays out through it that is quite fascinating, because what you see happen is in the opening scene, you see Willy. He is on this journey, has been on this journey of crafting his chocolate. And he is coming into this city that is known for their restaurants and known for their chocolate. And he wants to make his name. He wants to make a name for himself inside of the chocolate world of this city, because if he does, then he has made it. Yet what comes into his way is the chocolate cartel, as they say. These guys that have chocolate businesses that don't want to see him succeed because it'll take away from the business that they have going on. And it's the origin story of how Willy became Wonka and the journey that he went on for that. And ultimately, inside of that, we see Willy at the very beginning of the movie. He is on a boat and he's floating toward this city. And he has all these dreams and visions and desires for what is to come. And it's met with some trouble right away. So let's get some context. Let's watch the opening scene, and then we'll jump into the rest of the story.
After 7 years of life upon the ocean, it is time to bid the 7 seas farewell. And the city I've pinned 7 years of hopes on lies just over the horizon. I can hear the harbor bell. Land ahoy! Got a tattered overcoat and battered suitcase. Got a pair of leaky boots upon my feet.
Sorry, Cook.
Gotta drug myself up by my one good bootlace. Got if I want to make ends meet. I've poured everything I've got into my chocolate. Now it's time to show the world my recipe.
Good luck, Willie!
I've got 12 silver sovereigns in my pocket and a hat full of dreams. There's a famous restaurant on every street here. There's Brandino's and the Bar Parisien. Restaurant maps, sir? Thank you. Got a little map to tell me where to eat here. Had a dozen silver sovereigns, now I'm somehow down to 10. Want the finest produce, this is where they stock it.
That's 3 sovereigns, mate.
Though the prices are suspiciously extreme.
Break my pumpkin, you pay for it.
I've got 5, 6, 7. 6 silver sovereigns in my pocket. And
Cologne?
No, leave me alone. At last, the gallery gourmet. I knew that we'd see it one day. It's everything you said, Mama, and oh, so much more. Each way that you turn, another famous chocolate store. Here's my destiny, I just need to unlock it. Will I crash and burn or go up like a rocket? I got nothing to offer but my chocolate and a hat full of dreams. Yeah.
No daydreaming.
So, by the way, this is a musical, and I pick it for all the musical haters, just so that you can't walk out and you have to enjoy a musical at some level. But here's the reality. Willy Wonka runs into this city, and he has a hat full of dreams, goes the song. He has these dreams, these elaborate plans, the desire to become the next great chocolatier inside of the city, and it's met with joy and passion until he hits lands, where all of a sudden he starts losing his money left and right. For one reason or another, he starts going down, 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 down until he gets to 1 silver sovereign. And then you see inside of the movie, he actually loses that, and he is broke. All of a sudden, all of his dreams are met with some hardship, met with some trouble, met with a wall. How am I going to keep going? Where do I go from here? What do I do with this? And today, we're actually going to look at the conversation around what's your hat full of dreams? We're going to use this question as kind of the barometer for it. I'd write it down. It's the main idea for today. What is your God dream? What is your God dream? All right? What's your, as Willie would sing, hat full of dreams? Now listen, for some of us, we're like, I stopped dreaming long ago. This movie's cool. It's awesome. My kids can, feel the excitement with it, but I'm not sure where to go with this. For others of us, we're just like, what do you mean by God dream? And what's that different than a dream? What's this look like? Well, this is how I would define a God dream, okay? A God dream is having a vision for something better and partnering with God in a place of need. It's having a vision for something better and partnering with God. God has invited you into a place of need to ultimately meet that. Willie, he ran into the city. He not only wanted to become a great chocolatier, yes, but he also saw that chocolate was simple. Chocolate was very ordinary. Chocolate was just kind of the ho-hum. You do this and you have this. And he created chocolate that was magnificent, chocolate that was weird, chocolate that had all sorts of different things going on. And he wanted to present the world with something better when it came to chocolate. And he wanted to jump into that in the city where chocolate was famous. And I think there's 2 things that often get in the way of our dreams that would, I would say, get in the way of a God dream. The first one I would write down is this: myself. What can get in the way of a God dream? Myself. Here's the reality. We watch a movie like this and it's inspiring. If you're an adult or a parent in the room, you're like, this is great for my kids. This is cool. You're talking about dreaming, talking about imagination, talking about ideas, talking about where do we go from here. but this isn't for me because I don't have any more dreams. Or I don't have dreams that will go anywhere. Or maybe I'm not sure what God is calling me to dream about. I'm not sure that God is calling me into anything. I'm not sure that I'm young enough to have dreams anymore. My dreams are back here. They didn't get fulfilled, so what do I do here? Or I think the other way myself can get in the way of God dreams is if it's all about myself. That oftentimes I can take God dreams and make them my dreams because of my selfish, sinful nature. I desire to do my own thing with it. So the first way is myself. The second thing that can get in the way of a God dream is the mundane. And this was Willie's story. He comes into the city and he's like, yes, right? You remember like graduating from high school, you're 18, and you're like, I'm going to conquer the world, right? And you go out, and then you start college, and then you start living on your own, and then you have debt, and then you have to pay for this, and then you have a family starts, right? And then you have to get food on the table, and all of a sudden you're living life, and it is Monday through Sunday, and then it starts over again, it starts over again, it starts over again, and all of your silver sovereigns are just going and going and gone, and the dreams that you once had no longer exist, really. And here's the reality. We can watch this movie, and it can be a cool Hollywood scene, but how relatable is it actually to my life, you might be asking? Because the mundane has taken over. And a God dream feels like a very distant thing, whether it was way back here or it's never going to be out there. And I think what God wants more than anything inside this conversation is not for us to go charge the mountain and do it on ourselves and be the captain of the army and go after it. But I think rather he wants us to connect the gospel, the good news of Jesus, to what it means to have a God dream. Because I think the gospel actually reframes this idea of dreaming and makes it a God dream. Because here's the reality. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. He created a good world for good works to play out in them. And we see that. He invites Adam and Eve to be his image bearers and to be responsible for the land and to cultivate it and to go and be kind of his ambassadors and do what he would do amongst the land and to be fruitful and multiply, to be kind of the little king and queen of God's kingdom and play out and trust in God and play out his desire for what the earth was supposed to be. Very quickly, we see they were deceived. And ultimately, they were deceived by what? By Satan, who was calling into question trusting God. Listen, he didn't first call them into some behavior. He called them to into kind of question trusting God. Do you really think he has good plan for you? Do you really think that he said this? Do you really think that he meant this? Don't you think you could be your own God in an essence? And they took a bite of that fruit, and all of a sudden, this relationship that was with God separates. And not just relationally did that separate, but our purpose and meaning, and ultimately how we cultivate and kind of drive into the world gets separated from God's purpose and mission originally. And all of a sudden, we're just playing little g gods, trying to figure out how do we do this and screwing it up massively, because what is at the foundation of our lives without Jesus is evil, selfishness. And so all of a sudden, our dreams become very tied to how I can succeed and accomplish. Jesus then comes onto the scene. What was Jesus' God dream? Was to redeem and restore God's people to him. And that's what Jesus came to do, to be on mission for. He lived the life you and I could never live, no matter how hard we tried. Died the death that we deserved, rose again so that we could have life. Yes, he gives us life through his death and resurrection, but do you also know what he revives in the process? Our identity. He calls us children of God. John writes about this in John 1:12. He writes about this in 1 John 3. We are children of God in Jesus. We also have a community in Jesus. And we have a renewed purpose and meaning in Jesus. That all of a sudden, I am tied to his kingdom efforts, and my dreams become hyper-focused on where he is leading and what he is doing, what he's inviting me into. And he invites us to say yes to that journey. Now listen, for some of us this morning, it is maybe not the question, what is your God dream? But the question might be, have you said yes to Jesus? Because a God dream doesn't happen without Jesus connected to your life and you following him. And so for some of us, it is coming to the reality that God loves you and you are in desperate need of a Savior because we are all at the root level sinners and selfish and in it for ourselves. And that's why he sent Jesus, not to push us away, but to pursue us and invite us through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection to have life with him. Simply put, you can say yes to Jesus today and have a renewed relationship with the God of the universe and be redeemed into his purpose and his plans for all those he calls children of himself. But for others of us, we've said yes to Jesus. And here's the reality. We live in the mundane. We come Sunday, we go with our week. We come another Sunday, we go with our week. We come Sunday, go another week. And we have lost sight of what maybe God has called us or is calling us into or desires to invite us into as a part of his mission and purpose inside of the worlds that we exist in. We don't just exist to live in the mundane. We exist to live in the mission of where God has invited us into. And my challenge for you is this. As we navigate this conversation, ask yourself, what is my God dream? Do I know what my God dream is? And has God invited me into something like that? We're going to look at a story, and we're just going to look through the steps of understanding a God dream. The story comes from the book of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is found in the Old Testament. The story of Nehemiah. Nehemiah is an Israelite. He is of the people of God. The Israelites in the story of Nehemiah are in exile. They're in Babylon. That means that Babylon took over the Israelites, destroyed their city, and then took all the people to their nation and is raising them up with language and food and culture and beliefs to be theirs. And so this would have been very humiliating for the Israelites. They would have been living somewhere else. They wouldn't have had the temple to worship in. They would not be around their God. They would have been seeing different little g gods, and they would have been very out of their comfort zone. And this is where we find Nehemiah. It's about 1,000 years after Moses, about 400 before Jesus, and he's the cupbearer to the king of Babylon. Which means this, that literally every day his life is on the line. Because a cupbearer would drink the wine and taste the food before they gave it to the king, so that if it was poisoned, they'd watch that guy die, and the king wouldn't. And so every meal, can you just imagine? Every meal I look forward to, I'm excited about. But for Nehemiah, every meal he's like, is this my last? This steak looks great, but it could be injected with poison. So we'll just see, right? And he doesn't go, everything's good. That's the life he was living. And he was faithful to God. Here's what's interesting. About 70 years after the exile happens, we see that the king allows for a remnant, a group of people to go back to Jerusalem. Only about 2% of the Israelites decide to go back, which is about 50,000-ish, to go back to the ruins of Jerusalem, to go back to their homelands. The rest stay. And this is where we find Nehemiah 1. Nehemiah is met by some of the guys that went to Jerusalem. They come back to share the message of what's going on. In Nehemiah 1, we see this written. Nehemiah says, the words of Nehemiah, in the month of Kislev, in the 20th year, while I was in the citadel of Susa, Hananiah, one of my brothers, came from Judah with some other men. And I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile and also about Jerusalem. So he's asking those people that stayed there, those people that are there, the people, how are they doing? And how is Jerusalem, the city overall? What is going on there? Well, he continues. Verse 3 and 4, they said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, and its gates have been burned with fire. When I heard these things, this is Nehemiah, I sat down and wept. For some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. What does it look like to have a God dream? What does it look like to be invited into a God dream? What does it look like for a God dream to happen? I'm going to run through 6 different things in different passages. They're not on the screen, so you're going to have to keep up with your notes. The first thing is this. We are moved by what moves us. We are moved by what moves us. Here's the reality. Nehemiah was moved by what was happening inside of Jerusalem and to the people of Jerusalem, the Israelite people. He was moved to consider what was going on there. What is the first thing he did? Did he like step up and like charge? No, he wept. Which, listen, eyes up here, is a very, very different cultural norm than what we are invited into today. I think we're often met with messaging of get over it, get through it, get past it. It's okay, figure it out. Nehemiah was hit with the pain of his people and the pain of the God he served, and he wept. And he sat in that for a moment. He was moved in such a way that moved him. I would say this, a God dream needs a holy discontent. A God dream needs a holy discontent. What's a holy discontent? It is looking upon something and saying, that should not be, or how it is not good, or what's happening there is not healthy, and something needs to change, and it needs to change within Jesus. Holy discontent. The reality is this, Nehemiah was met with that holy discontent because the city that portrayed God and God's people to the world was demolished, and his people were scattered, and Nehemiah was broken by it, moved by what moves us. The question being, do I invite God to break my heart? Do I invite God to break my heart? He's met with people that are disgraced. He's met with a city that's shambled, and it breaks his heart because he knows that it breaks the God of the universe's heart. To see that once was is no longer displaying to the world who God is. The second thing I would say is this. We are moved by what moves us, but we're moved to praying, not planning. It's the second thing. We're moved to praying, not planning inside of a God dream. Oh man, when I get an idea in my mind, the next thing I want to do is plan it. Go after it. What's the next thing Nehemiah does? He prays, he fasts, he mourns. Which in our visionary leadership development models today would be the last thing you'd be invited to do. And yet Nehemiah sits in the pain and the breaking of his heart with God. And he invites God in an intimate way to be a part of this journey because he knows God's inviting him into this journey. Listen, I think often the last thing I think about is to pray, is to fast, is to mourn. Praying is this conversation we have with the God of the universe in such a way to listen to him and to invite him into the conversation we are having. Secondly, fasting. Right? We don't often hear about fasting. Usually we hear about it in dietary ways. It's a method to dieting, and that's fine, but there are spiritual implications to fasting throughout Scripture. Fasting is one of the ways to intimately be in relationship with God, giving up of something for the sake of being with God and inviting him to fill you up with his word, fill you up with who he is and his character. And Nehemiah is inviting him, giving up of something because there is this need that cannot be met simply by food, and he is inviting God to meet it into the conversation. Then he mourns. Listen, gosh, this is the part I think we miss. I like to get past things really quickly. Nehemiah doesn't leave it alone. Nehemiah allows the pain of what's going on to sit with him for a while. We live in a social media world where everything has to be really good all the time. And mourning feels like it should happen in one moment, one time, one place, and then we move on from there. Get it done there, and we move on. Nehemiah, you know how long between this text and the text where movement starts to happen with God's dream? 4 months. And I believe that this was happening for 4 months, where he was fasting and praying and mourning at some level. Listen, before we ever take step into the God dream that God invites us into, we need to spend time with the God who is leading that dream. And that's what Nehemiah meets face to face with. But how does he pray? And what does he pray about? And how does that conversation take place? This is his prayer coming out of this passage, Nehemiah 1, in verse 5 through 7, we see this take place. Lord, he prays, the God of heaven, the great and awesome God, who keeps his covenant of love with those who love him and keep his commandments. Let your ear be attentive and your eyes open to hear the prayer your servant is praying before you day and night for your servants, the people of Israel. I confess the sins we Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed against you. We have acted very wickedly towards you. We have not obeyed the commands, decrees, and laws you gave your servant Moses. It's a fascinating passage in prayer to read, because Nehemiah not only praises the God of the universe. You are this great, awesome God. You're covenant-keeping, you're promise-keeping, you love and you're faithful, you're merciful and gracious. God, we know those things, but he has led to what? Confession. Anytime that we meet with the God of the universe, just anticipate that there will be confession involved. The more that I drive into the reality of the gospel and the good news of Jesus, who God is and what he has done for us, the more that I see how sinful I am and how gracious he is in turn. And it leads me to give to him the things that I'm holding back, that I think are giving me life that aren't, for the sake of receiving life. And that's what Nehemiah is doing. He is recognizing the celebration of the God of the universe, and then he is confessing that I cannot do it on my own, and my people cannot do it on my own. We need you, and I am so sorry for the things that we have done to you. And that's where he leans into, and he's asking the God of the universe for direction and wisdom as he patiently and persistently prays these prayers and runs into God who is pursuing him. After about 4-ish months or so, we see chapter 2 come onto the scene where we see the king of Babylon actually ask Nehemiah a question. In the month of Nisan, which I don't know, maybe that's where the car company got their name, right? The 20th year, the king, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before, so the king asked me, "Why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart." I was very much afraid, but I said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad? When the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire." He just gives to the king what's going on because the king sees something is off, something is wrong. And so he invites Nehemiah to share with him what's going on. We'll see this in a moment. That was an open door. It was an open door for Nehemiah to share what's happening inside of this moment. Well, what takes place after that? As we continue, the king said to me in verse 4, "What is it you want?" Boom, door opens. As we'll get to this in a moment, but Nehemiah found a person of peace, which is unique because this would have probably been his enemy before. That's how he would have viewed him. Then I prayed to the God of heaven. As he's praying, I answer the king, "If it pleases the king and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried so that I can rebuild it." The third thing I would say is this: we are moved to courage. We are moved to courage. Not to be cowards, but to be courageous. Here's the reality. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's not a lack of fear. It is running through the wall of fear. You read what Nehemiah says. He's like, "I'm afraid." Why? Because the king opens the door, and Nehemiah, I think at this point, Nehemiah's like, "Okay, Lord, I see ya. I see what you're doing." Right? You ever have a door open and you're like, "Okay, that wasn't me, because that shouldn't happen by me." Nehemiah knows that, and I think he's praying because maybe part of it is like, "Lord, is this it?" And the other part of it might just be like, "Wow, Lord, didn't see that coming." And he is asking the Lord to lead him into that. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is running through the wall of fear because I have a God who is right beside me, running through that wall with me. And if the God of the universe is inviting me into this dream, why would that stop me? So even though Nehemiah is afraid, he has the anxiety gut, his mind is reeling, his knees are shaking, he runs through that wall because why? The God of the universe is with him. And I think there are two reasons we need to have courage in the midst of a God dream. The first is this: it'll be hard. It'll be hard. Following Jesus is never easy. If it is, maybe I should question if I'm following Jesus or not. Or am I just following a culture of Christianity? It's hard. Why is it hard? Not primarily physically, it might be. Not primarily mentally, it might be. Not primarily emotionally, it might be, but spiritually. When you and I say yes to a God dream, we're going into battle spiritually. And there is an enemy who wants nothing more than to shut down anything of God's kingdom in this world. That is his purpose, and that is his reason for existing. And so you have to understand it's hard. When you say yes to following Jesus, it's hard. But when you say yes to following Jesus into a dream that God is in with and you're walking alongside and he's calling you to do things that are hard, it is going to come with some sacrifice, and it is going to be spiritually inviting you into something different. But also, you're going to experience pushback, which we'll get to here in a moment. You're going to experience pushback. It's hard, yes. You'll experience pushback from people or lies or places or social media, wherever it may be. You're going to experience pushback just like Nehemiah did and just like Willie did. Willy Wonka experienced pushback from the chocolate cartel, which just sounds super sketchy, and just what are they doing with their life, right? But the chocolate cartel hated that Willie came in with a new chocolate, hated that he was going to take over their business. And we see this scene play out, this next scene we're going to watch, as them confronting Willie. So take a look at it, and then we'll go from there.
Let's try one of these so-called hover chunks. Ooh, it's not just chocolate, is it? There's marshmallow.
That's right. Harvested from the mallow marshes of Peru.
And caramel.
But it's salted. With the bittersweet tears of a Russian clown.
Is it? Surely not. Cherry.
Cherry picked by the pick of the cherry pickers from the imperial gardens in Japan.
Well, Mr. Wonka, I've been in this business a very long time, and I can safely say that of all the chocolate I have ever tasted, this is without doubt the absolute 100% worst.
Woo! There we have it, ladies and gentlemen. An endorsement from Mr. Wait, the worst?
We three are the fiercest of rivals, and yet we agree on one thing. A good chocolate should be simple, plain, uncomplicated.
Whereas this, with all its bells and whistles, well, it's just
weird.
You're gonna hate what happens next.
What's happening? Oh, what's going on?
That's the hoverfly. It's broken out of its cocoon. It's flapping its wings like Billy-o.
What the hell?
You're off your rocker, Wonka. Who in their right mind wants a chocolate that makes you fly?
Well, let's find out, shall we? Who's for a hovercraft?
How many would eat a chocolate that makes you fly? Yeah, my people, right? The first service are like, I don't know. Like the second service knows what's up, right? Willie's met with some confrontation, right? Pushback. He's met with these three guys that run chocolate businesses that hate what he's doing because he's changing the landscape of the game. He is trying to do something better in a place of need inside of the chocolate world. And we see Nehemiah, he's met with the same kind of resistance. In chapter 2, Nehemiah is met by some guys that hate what he is doing. When Sanballat and Tobiah officially heard about this, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. They're of the people that exiled Israel, and they hate the Israelites. They don't want to see anything good happen to the Israelites, and so they're pushing against that. And inside of that, they push so much so that Nehemiah is forced to respond. But it continues. As Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you are doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? So they start questioning. What are you doing? Are you going against that guy? Are you going against the king? Are you really sure you want to do this? Are you sure? Because you know what's going to happen if they find out. If things don't go the way that you are planning, it's going to go south. Later on in chapter 4, we see it happen again. They're in the middle of building a wall. They're in the middle of building this wall, and they send Tobiah to give a message to Nehemiah and the people. This is what he says. What are they building? Even a fox climbing up on it would break down their wall of stones, right? Just kind of like, na-na-na-na, boo-boo. fox would break down your wall, right? They're just annoying the bejeebers out of Nehemiah. Why? Because they want to crush the God dream. They want to crush the God dream that Nehemiah and the people of Israel were following. And the reality is this: you have to be ready for pushback. You need to plan for pushback. That there are going to be people and there are going to be times that come face to face where they're going to say things, they're going to not say things, they're going to post things, they're not going to post things, they're not going to be with you in it, they're going to question you in it, they're going to ask why, and it might simply be, why are you following this religion called Christianity? Why are you saying yes to Jesus? It might just even start there. Or it might be, why are you saying no to that job promotion to go and do this thing? Why are you saying no to that vacation to do this thing? Why are you hanging out with those people instead of these people? And people are going to push back and ask and point out and say, look, you've got nothing. This is what Nehemiah responds as: hear us, our God, for we are despised. Turn their insults back on their own heads. Give them over as plunder in the land of captivity. Do not cover up their guilt or blot out their sins from your sight, for they've thrown insults in the face of the builders, the crew. Here's two things that Nehemiah did. First, in the face of pushback, he continually pointed to God as the director of the dream. He always gives credit to God, and he continues to follow him because he is the director of the dream. Listen, if you and I face pushback, even just simply about our faith, we need to keep our eyes on the one who went before us and who is inviting us into it. Our God dream, just following Jesus, because why? Because he ultimately is not just the source of some religion, but he is the source of life and life in and of itself. And if I can trust him with eternal life, why can't I trust him with this life right here, right now? And that is my biggest fear as a pastor, is that we're okay trusting Jesus for my eternal life. I got out of hell free, but we're not okay trusting Jesus with the life he's given us on this earth to do what? To do for his kingdom what he has done for us in salvation. He's inviting you into something. And Nehemiah knows that, and so he's like, I don't care what those guys are saying. Them fools. They're fools. Because this dream is God ordained and he's invited me into it. I'm going to follow the God of the universe, because who is man to tell me what to do in spite of that? The second thing is he plans for pushback, like logistically. Nehemiah 4, 8 through 9. They all plotted together to come and fight against Jerusalem, stir up trouble against it. But we prayed to our God and posted a guard day and night to meet this threat. Sometimes you just got to logistically plan for pushback. You have to turn off the social media. You have to maybe not respond to that message. You have to have someone that you can bounce that off of, right? So that you know how to interact with it. The reality is Nehemiah planned for it. He knew it was coming. He even goes to a point, they sent a message. They're on the battlefield. They're ready to battle the Israelites. And they sent a message to Nehemiah saying, why don't you come out and fight us? Why don't you come out and talk? Why don't you come out and make a peace treaty? Why don't you come out and we'll just solve this thing? And Nehemiah says to the messenger that goes back to them, he's on the wall working, and he says, I'm not coming. I'm not coming down. I have such a great work that I am doing. I'm going to continue on it. Here's the reality. When you are so grabbed by a God dream, there's nothing that's going to pull you down from that wall. And I think the reality is this, that sometimes we get distracted by the noise, that we don't ever look at what God is leading us into and directing us into. We get distracted by this noise that's out there on social media, this noise from family and friends, the noise from the culture, that it so dictates we miss God's invitation for us. Nehemiah, he kept journeying to the wall. 2 more things, then I'm done. 5 is this: we need to find people of peace. We need to find people of peace. Willie found the right people to bring around him. He did not do this on his own. He found some people. The story's wacky and weird. Watch the movie. It's musical throughout, but he finds people to help him, and they make a shop happen. Then they go on with their life, and then he has to find new people to invite in to make a factory happen. And this is the last scene of the movie, and it's a song that is very familiar to the Wonka saga. And he invites one of the Oompa Loompas to start with him in this journey of creating a factory. Take a look at it, and then we'll finish.
Come with me.
All right.
And you'll be
Where?
in a world of pure imagination.
It's a ruined castle.
Take a look and you'll see into your imagination.
Frankly, I rather doubt it.
We'll begin with a spin, traveling in the world of my creation. What we'll see will defy explanation.
Does defy explanation.
If you want to view paradise, simply look around and view it. Anything you want to do it. Want to change the world, there's nothing to it.
Not bad.
There is no life I know to compare with pure imagination. Living there, you'll be free if you truly wish to be.
So you saw the opening scene and the ending scene. You can say you watched Wonka in church today. Well done, right? Here's the reality. He invited people into the journey with him, and Nehemiah found people of peace throughout his journey. The king ended up being a person of peace that invited him to go on the journey to Jerusalem. You read in chapter 3, the remnant, he talks about specific people that give to building of the wall. That group of people are people of peace. And then you see Ezra the priest come in towards the end, leading the people spiritually. It's a person of peace that came around Nehemiah in the gifts and abilities, the encouragement that all made it happen. Inside of a God dream, you cannot do it on your own. You need God and the people of peace to come around you to encourage when things don't make sense and when you get pushback and when the dream doesn't feel like it's going anywhere. Then lastly is this. I'd write it down this way. We need to celebrate and confess. We need to celebrate and confess. They finish the wall. You look at chapter 7, 8, 9, and then on. They finish the wall. They actually start weeping. They start weeping. They're just like moved with emotion. They're moved to this kind of like almost confession in a way. They're moved in what is happening. And then Nehemiah says, no, celebrate. And then after they celebrate, in chapter 9, they go back to confessing, which is fascinating to me. Because inside of this story, I told you at the beginning, is about a group of people who were displaced and lost and ultimately were restored and redeemed by the God of the universe through one man saying yes to the God dream that God invited him in on. And any time that I am met with redemption right in front of me, it ought to move me to celebrate and to confess. Why? We'll clearly celebrate when God does something incredible in someone's life and the gospel changes their life. We celebrate the bejeebers out of that. That should always be the response. But when I'm met face to face with the gospel taking place in someone's life and changing the environment of someone's life, I also should be moved to the ways that I lack trust in God still, and it should lead me to confession. Anytime the gospel is in front of me, I should celebrate and confess interchangeably. As I celebrate, I'm met with the ways that God is trying to still get into my life that I'm withholding from him. And then as I confess, I celebrate because he's doing the thing he did in that person's life in my life. And that's what the Israelites continually do. So as we end, I want you to think personally, and then we're going to think corporately for a second. The question I want to end on is the same question I started with. What is your God dream? What is your God dream? I think every single person can have a God dream. A dream that God invites us into, not one that we manufacture. Ultimately, I have a vision for something better that in a place of need. But where are you at inside of that? Maybe you haven't said yes to Jesus yet. I'd invite you to talk with me afterwards and explore what that looks like. But there's different stages and different phases that you might be in. I think the one that maybe we most likely need to talk about is the first stage. What is breaking or moving your heart? Have you prayed that prayer recently? Because if you continually pray, Lord, break my heart for what breaks yours, he will wreck it. He'll wreck it. I think that's why we don't pray it. Because it's really easy to be comfortable. It's really easy to show up here in decently comfy seats with okay coffee, sing some songs, listen to a good message, and be comfortable. I do it. I'm the pastor. Are we praying, God, break my heart for what breaks yours? That's where it started. Nehemiah was moved to weeping. Doesn't start with, let's charge the mountain. Let's do the thing. Let's take it over. It starts with being moved in emotion and need to something that shouldn't be. Listen, there's a lot of good things to do. Trust me, this world is broken, always has been broken, always will be broken until Jesus comes back. There's a lot of good things to do, but have you asked God to break your heart specifically for the dream that he is inviting you into, to go with him on that because he wants you there and he's inviting you into that space? Secondly are you spending time responding to God by praying? Maybe some of you are at this phase. He's invited you into something and you're like, well, I don't know what to do with this. I'm not sure how to navigate this. I'm not sure I want to do this. Have you spent time praying specifically about that thing he's inviting you into? Don't plan yet. I like to plan. I walk around Lake Anna and I'll pray. That's in a weekly rhythm of mine. And when I walk around Lake Anna, sometimes I'm like, Lord, would you show me what we should do this fall and how we should do it? And I assume that within an hour of praying to God, he'll show me everything. And that's a lie, because here's the reality. God's not in it for the answer. He's in it for the relationship. He doesn't want me just to have the answer to go play it out. He wants me to trust him more and more, even when the things that I planned don't go the way I think they should. He's inviting me to trust him more and more and more. Nehemiah spent 4 months. I like to spend 4 minutes and get an answer, right? Nehemiah spent 4 months or so and then didn't stop praying. Thirdly, where has God asked you to step with courage? Maybe you know where you need to step, and all it is breaking through that wall, letting God go first, and ultimately following him through the wall of fear. Fourth, are you planning for pushback? Just know that spiritually, you will be challenged more than you ever have if you answer the call of saying yes to Jesus in a God dream. The scariest place, the most vulnerable place is not comfortability. The most vulnerable place is saying yes to Jesus by following him into places where he's inviting you into, because that is where Satan wants to get you most. He's inviting you. Are you stepping into courage? Who are the people of peace around you? Do you need to celebrate or confess right now? Maybe you're there. Here, listen. Some of you are jumping into this, and I'm so proud of you. Some of you are jumping into this in our city, and I'm so proud of you. Like, there are things happening. I don't say this to say that this isn't happening. It's happening, and if you know it's happening in your life, you should be on the flywheel of celebrating and confessing, because you're seeing it play out in front of you, and you should be celebrating the God of the universe and what he's doing in your life and what he's doing in others' lives. But maybe it's not there yet. Maybe you haven't walked that journey, and that's okay. We want to invite you into considering that personally. But let me tell you collectively where we're at. As Paige and Jess come up to lead us in one last song. Collectively, our dream is a number. It's the 16,000. That is our dream here at Grace Church, Barberton campus right now. If you know what the 16,000 represents, that is the amount of people in our direct community of Barberton that would identify as religiously unaffiliated. We would consider them spiritually lost or spiritually seeking. That doesn't account for the religiously lost people inside of our community. Here's the reality. This is our dream. Eyes up here. I assume if you're sitting here that you're part of the crew going with me in that. If this is your first time, you're like, what did I sign up for? Just eat popcorn and enjoy the Sunday morning. But if you're here and you've been a part of this for a while, this is our dream. Listen, I don't wake up and dream about a bigger building. I could care less if we're in this building forever and always, or we get a bigger building. If the services grow exponentially or if they grow steadily. That's not the dream. The dream isn't to have all the programs and to have all the things happening. The dream isn't to become famous on social media. The dream is not to have all of the answers. The dream is this, that number every year shrinks because we, like Nehemiah, are on the wall, building the wall brick by brick. And when people come up against, or when plans don't go the way I think they should go, or when everything else looks great around us and it doesn't look great right in front of us, that we look at the God of the universe who led us into this dream and we trust him. And we keep walking with him, and we look at the naysayers and say, we have a great work that we're doing. I cannot come down now because we are focused on this. Listen, if we are just here to merely put on a service, we've lost sight of the dream. If we're here to have bigger programs and better presentations, we've lost sight of the dream. If we're here to do anything other than make Jesus make sense for the sake of the 16,000, we've lost sight of the dream. That's why we do something called community spaces. We pursue community spaces in our community because that is where we're going to meet people in the most desperate of needs. That's the invitation I'm giving to everyone in this room, to be part of the dream. It's hard, yes. It is tremendously hard. Does it make sense sometimes? Yes, does it make sense sometimes. Church on social media can look real fancy and real awesome. It can look like we have it all together sometimes. We don't. It's going to be messy. If you're willing to get messy, you're in the right space. Because our community is in need of a gospel, and Jesus, that's not fulfilling them already. I talked to 2 guys this week. I met one at the park. I had a phone conversation with another in desperate situations, not sure who they are or why they're here on this earth. And I got to share with them. Did, like, the angels start singing and a decision was made? Nope. But it wrecked my calendar for that. Us getting stuff done is about that. That is the dream. That is the wall we're building. That is the point. And I invite you to start praying that way. Break our hearts for what? The 16,000. Don't pray for bigger buildings. Don't pray for more programs. Don't pray for more people. If we are weeping for that, we'll be fine. God will lead us into it. Father, we thank you. Break our hearts for the 16,000. And then, Father, individually break our hearts for what breaks yours. Invite us into where you want us. We thank you, Father, for who you are. I'll let you